you.
So good afternoon, good morning, depending on what time zone you're in. Today is February 1st. We have an informal conversation in the Clean Network, the longest lasting weekly telecom hookup for the climate community. I think there is, and I'm pretty proud it's us. So let's start. Whoa, Wendy, what you got?
I know we're recording now, but now
Yes,
I see a weird automated read dashboard sent to everyone in the group chat all about features. But read dashboard is not something from Zoom. So it does seem like somehow either good or bad things got into our Zoom.
Yes.
Did everyone get a direct message from it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, didn't that go to the?
It's in the chat.
It's in the chat and went to everyone. And I don't know that we asked for read dashboard.
Yeah, well,
I'm gonna.
It says that somebody a participant requested it, so fess up.
It was you, Don. Nice try.
Oh, it does say that.
It could be a bot. It could itself have requested it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna copy the message and keep it and ask
questions.
I might need to put a pin on this meeting room. So
I appreciate that. So for all of those who are watching this recording, we're dealing with a technical issue that just popped up, something called Read Dashboard, a new feature or not feature of Zoom. So we'll come back to the regular scheduled programming in just a moment. So while we try and fess out what's happening. But let's get into the thrust of the informal conversation today. Today is again February 1st. I'm Frank Niepold. I'm the facilitator for today. So today we have informal. But what is are there any announcements? But before we do that, Carrie, have you been with us before? Is this your first? You have. Yes. I just don't remember you. So would you mind introducing yourself?
Last week. Oh, but yes, I've been here before. I'm Carrie Herndon. I'm the curriculum specialist at National Center for Science Education.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I do remember you now. Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. So maybe just for everyone to just announce yourself in the chat for Carrie, and I think that you may not know everybody, Carrie, so it'd just be easier that way. Does that work?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Trying to be an opening and welcoming, growing community. So that's kind of how you do that. But announcements, do we have anything that we want to announce? And again, remember, you're not only announcing for people who are in the Zoom room, but also the people who watch this recording who can't be here at 1 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesdays.
Yeah, well, I'll just announce that I am hoping that we'll spend a good chunk of the time today talking about the Heartland Institute shenanigans on sending out pamphlets to 100,000 teachers or something along those lines.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Don. Gina did catch that item for today. We have, I think, another item possibly as well. So we'll get that. Or any announcements or any other items that we want to flag for possible discussion? Both works. Gina, I'm sorry, Jen.
Hi. I had a question around any research that folks know equating education with carbon emissions. I've been working on a couple different grants or looking at potentially applying to a couple grants that have asked that question, like how many tons of carbon do you expect to save with your project? And I just don't know how, it's such a weird question to ask when talking about education. So I'm curious if anybody's come across that or has some thoughts on addressing it, or I might just skip applying because it annoys me so much. So anyway, any thoughts would be welcome though.
Looks like Cheney's got a thought.
Yeah, Eugene, I can't remember his last name, from
Cordero.
He's done research around the link between carbon emissions and climate education. I think he's published a few papers on it.
What's his name?
Eugene. Does anybody know his last name?
Cordero or something like that. He used to be more active.
I think he emailed me I can put you in touch with him if you want, but I'll email you his the papers that he sent me on it.
The
Thanks
project
so
he's
much.
done is the Green Ninja, but Jen, I would also encourage you to reach out to Deb Morrison, because the question that they're asking, I'm assuming you're applying for something, is a really important question that I think, can actually draw a direct claim from our work and carbon reduction more broadly than what Eugene has found. But the literature's thin. And so, if you're, where this is coming from is funders who really want to see carbon reductions, because all humanity should want carbon reductions, given what unmitigated climate change or insufficiently mitigated climate change looks like in the future. But the evidence so far is fairly thin. And that paper is specific to university students taking one class. So its extensibility is a little bit challenging, but it's the best we have. But I know Deb Morrison's been looking at how to build a bit bigger evidence base around that question.
Yeah, I did find reference to it in one of Christina Kwok's papers, and that was probably the reference to what you are both talking about. It just, anyway, it just seems, I know it's an important question, but I also feel, I don't know, that to try to equate the two could potentially undervalue education or try to put some sort of quantitative number on it, which I'm not sure if I agree with it or not.
I would love to talk about that more in the future from people that know more about the whole initiative and or strategies, because if I was faced with that for renewing one of my grants, I would be stumped, like sort of what you're experiencing, Jen, with, look, I'm trying to increase earth science literacy so people understand the problem, scope of the problem, are motivated to work on the problem. To do that, we actually travel some people. So I'm going to fly people on planes. So I'm actually going to have a carbon footprint, and I'll have no proof that my work led to reductions. So what would you like me to write in this area of your grant application?
There was one paper that I found that actually talked about that increasing education would increase carbon emissions, because as you look at a global scale, you're elevating people's ability to participate in education, and that's gonna, anyway. So there was they were equating, but not, it wasn't, but it was in the long, what they were saying was that in the long run, it's better, of course, if people have more access to education, but it may actually increase emissions in the short term.
So Gina, and this time I mean Gina, why don't we put this down in a future clean call, either a weekly, and we could even invite Eugene to come join us. And he's one level out from the Clean Network. And I think he's been here before, but let's ask him to join us, and maybe some other people, maybe Deb Morrison, and maybe some other people who, this is a really, 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 really important topic. And I think as we get further into our work, we have to draw direct connections between our work and carbon reduction. How you do it, and especially dealing with that point, Jen, you just made, which I think is backwards, but I get why they're saying it. But let's make sure we don't drop this one.
Do you know him at all, Frank?
Yeah, of course.
Would you mind sending him an initial email, maybe?
So just put it in the spreadsheet of things we track for future calls, and then I will follow up with Eugene myself and see if we can get a scheduled date. So, all right, cool. Well, that was good job. We did what we were supposed to. All right, awesome. What else? Any other announcements?
I would just like to say, oh, sorry, Wendy, if I cut you off. I didn't raise my hand. Bad etiquette. The survey, Frank sent out another email message just now. I sent one out yesterday. If you have not completed the Clean Network survey, please do so. We are closing it soon. And let me know if you have any issues completing it.
I just put it in the chat as well.
For your friends.
But it'd be really important to have this done. It's a cool survey. It'll take a little bit of time, but it's actually, I really appreciate the way it was constructed. And Aaron, it's nice to have you with us today, but it'd be fun to have people from the energy side of the equation also represented there, because I think your answers to those questions are going to be complementary but different than the more the climate side. Not that you're not on the climate side. You know what I mean.
And a question, Frank?
Yeah, please.
Regina, on follow-up that you've had a chance to look at the results and everything. I imagine we're not the only ones where we were dutifully filling things in and then hit what turned out to be the submit button. Is that, are you getting people that there's holes in what the survey is? And if so, does it help if we go back and fill in those holes, or you've got enough? You know what I'm talking about, right, Gina?
Yeah, I think we talked about that briefly. If you have time to go back and fill in those holes, I would recommend it. But as complete as possible would be good. You can resubmit it, and we'll clean it. We'll clean all the data after.
And if so, go in and do a fresh one and just fill in the holes, and you'll be able to oh yeah, this is the missing parts of the first one.
I don't think the user has the ability to go in and edit after, so you probably will have to do a new one.
Yeah.
Just do it again, Jim, and because it's associated with you, we'll just see one's complete and one's incomplete, and we'll just remove the incomplete one, just so that it doesn't skew. Or Anna and the team will figure out some brilliant way of dealing with this common problem. But if you have a partial one and you can't get back in, just do it again, please. That would be my suggestion. Unless somebody says that's stupid, Frank, stop that. Hearing nothing, let's go. Aaron, do you want to bring our attention to this this cool event that I think I grabbed the right link for that? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Erin Twomley, and there is a group that is more focused on the workforce side of issues and kind of the how do we get industry to partake in recruitment of the workforce. So synergistic to what Clean is doing, but they held a summit last year called the Renewable Energy Education Summit, and they're hosting it again. So Frank put in the link. You can see CWA. We're not like an official membership organization. We're just trying to figure out kind of if we're going to be a formal association. But we're hosting a summit on February 10th. It's virtual. And we have a lot of actually industry partners there, as well as educators, researchers, both K through 12 and university level, kind of convening around this main question of how can we encourage a more diverse population to engage in a carbon neutral economy, and how do we ensure that this transition also benefits different groups of people like frontline communities, right? So it's a good conversation for our kind of summit. We also will have 5 energy superheroes, so women from the energy industry who are working in climate and energy, keynoting on that day. So if you want to find more out about kind of that association and that annual summit, Frank put the link in the chat. Thanks, Frank.
Oh, Aaron, I this snuck up on me. This is awesome. I'm so happy you guys are doing this. So for all of those listening, including the people I'm seeing, absolutely check this out. And Aaron, I'd ask that you send this out to the Clean Network as well.
Sure. Yep.
That'd be really cool. That'd be awesome. Cool.
Yes. And I did ask them to, because I want to figure out Clean and them and how we work together. So I think your survey is going to be a great way to line those up.
Cool. So that'd be perfect. So I mean, Gina, let's try and keep the date open on that, because it'd be really smart if we could get some of the energy side of our community filled in, because it is the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network.
So that's February 10th, Gina. So if you could keep it even a couple days after that, we will ping all like 150, probably we have near 200 people.
Thank you very much. I definitely agree. We need energy side. So I'll let Anna know in our next meeting.
All right, cool. Any other announcements? Anything else kicking? All right. We can always come back if there's an I forgot, toward the end. So before we get into the conversation Don wants to go to, are there any other topics that we want to make sure that we attend to today? Anything popping that we want to make sure we cover, as well as the topic that Don Haas, Aaron, and Ginger, that was around the next push of the Heartland Institute's climate misinformation education push. So Jen.
Sorry, I have another one. And I had sent an email out to the CLEAN listserv. I'm creating a syllabus for our volunteers and staff on climate change solutions and education. That's good for a general audience, but in kind of short chunks. So I've gotten amazing responses from the CLEAN community, and I am going to share that when I've finished compiling it, but I'm still looking for resources. So if anybody has, podcasts, short videos, books, whatever you think, resources that would be helpful for training your kind of go-tos, please drop them in the chat and I will grab them. And I'm also convening a group of museum leaders from a bunch of different institutions across the country to talk about this in this new climate collaborative, which is a cross-section of like folks from art museums, history, and science centers. And so we're going to be sharing resources as well. And again, I'll share that back out to the CLEAN community when we've come up with some suggestions. So thanks for anything in advance.
Jen, one thing that comes out of that note is, Don, I'm wondering if we shouldn't add Jen to our Aztec pre-conference planning. I mean, that's a totally illogical thing to do.
Yeah. Cool. So just saying a word about what that is. We are planning to do a pre-conference workshop at the Association of Science and Technology Centers meeting in September. That proposal is due Monday, February 7th. So we're working on it now, and the form only allows 5 individuals listed in the form, but it says we can add additional panelists after, and so if anyone's interested in being a part of that, let either Frank or I know.
Perfect. All right, so anything else? Just checking the room.
And seeing the question of what is the topic, Katie Worth, who wrote this book, is kind of going to give us a framing about the state of climate change education in America with sort of a school-based perspective, and we're going to round it out with across the educational ecosystem for the state of climate education and what we need to do about it, I guess, would be a one sentence description of it.
And just Don, I did reach out to the head of climate change for Pittsburgh, and we're setting up a meeting to talk about actually a climate solutions tour for Pittsburgh.
Okay. Cool.
And that's beginning to make progress. And
Okay.
The executive director for the Carnegie Mellon National Natural History Museum and I are trying to set up a meeting to talk about whether they could help us with that. So, but it's just a cool opportunity to come into Pittsburgh and do some really interesting work.
Frank,
So
I might just add one kind of slight angle within this, not trying to make all different discussion do things. I found very interesting an article in Scientific American that just came out, which is addressing how by the age of 14, young people are pretty open to accepting, let's say, conspiracy theories or things that, views that are not based in fact, all kinds of strange things, and how difficult it is for education to deal with that. What are our approaches to have students be able to tell the difference between fact and fiction and so on. And it's just an angle here because there's Heartland Institute and folks are coming in, and this is a very important subject, folks are coming deliberately with misinformation. And, but how do we help students to do it beyond simply the thing of trust authority, right? You find authorities that you believe in that tend to be right, and you do that, but how can they sort out fact and fiction from other things? It's just a lot going on.
So Jim, if you wouldn't mind putting the link to that in the chat, because I think that's a perfect segue to Don's topic. Because, Don, I mean, the education in its truest form is the opposite of what you just described, right? So it's about building skill to do. So how we are different than what Heartland's trying to do is foundational to that work. So Don, why don't you set up what you think the conversation should be, and then let's take it from there.
Well, I'm not sure what the conversation should be, though. We've started, I've got a Google Doc with some sort of basics in it, which I'll put the link in the chat here. But it doesn't have the form I want to get to, and the form I want to get to is something on the order of what would be 2 printed pages, one sheet back to back, that describes why Heartland Institute's efforts are problematic, and gives us some common talking points. And by us, I mean sort of the royal we of folks working in climate change education, and ultimately not do, like a press release about this, because we don't want to give them free advertising about their nefarious work. Have this thing that we can refer to that's a couple of pages long, that that sort of says, here's the problem, here's why you should ignore it, and here are the organizations that agree on that. That's kind of the ultimate goal, is this right-sized response that doesn't give them attention, but gives us a coherent response. I am anticipating that folks on this call will get phone calls from media organizations as the Heartland Institute gets this stuff out. And I guess it looks like there's a Scientific American article already out there. I didn't know about that. So that's kind of my thoughts. What do you think?
Well, I definitely agree of not giving them publicity. I mean, I think was trying to share correct information and getting correct information into people's hands. It's probably what we just have to focus on, and like just keep having the conversation, like Dr. Hayo says.
Yeah, right. Gina?
I don't know if anyone knows Mike Hoffman, who is a part of the network, or if anyone has worked with him. So he emailed me and said that he couldn't make the meeting today. But he said, sorry. He said, my nickel's worth, but I saw the correspondence suggesting that we're not going to raise a fuss, which I agree makes sense. But he suggested that we counter what they're doing, and said I could write an op-ed and would love to do one on something like Heartland doesn't care about our kids, just an initial thought. So I did suggest, if he feels strongly about that he, contact the listserv or contact you, Don, or something.
Yeah.
But I told him I would communicate that message. I understand both sides.
Right, I do too. Yeah, and I think let them fire the first shot. And if they get press, then I get reactive versus proactive, but I really do worry about us highlighting their message and amplifying their message. And I really, really don't want that to happen. And so they don't need free advertising for what they're doing.
So Don, let me counter that argument for just a quick second. For the longest time, people from the climate community and the energy community for like transition economy away from fossil fuels have said education is a non-strategy. It's not important. We should not do that. That's a waste of time. That's a distraction. That's do nothing there, right? And I come from the climate community, right? And so the fact that I've been doing this as long as I have is kind of an anomaly. And I'm just pigheaded and stubborn like that. But the people who want no change to the status quo are actively working the education side. There's something there.
Yeah.
That they see education as a powerful tool for miseducation, right? But the climate community, whether it's AGU, AMS, federal agencies, philanthropic entities, the fact that there's no philanthropy focused on climate education, zero. Maybe a project here and there at best. Tells us that the community who is trying to spend, and they're spending billions of dollars on policy and technology and all that kind of stuff, but education is a non-strategy for them, means that they're leaving, that they don't see it as an important strategy, whereas people like Heartland and fossil fuel companies see it as a powerful strategy. There's something there that I think we should acknowledge that, but at the same time, not become propaganda. And I think exploring what propaganda, because usually the thing I get from that community is what we are doing is propaganda indoctrination. And I'm like, whoa. I thought that's really interesting because you're doing exactly what you're claiming I'm doing. But we haven't had that kind of conversation because we don't define our terms and explain how what we're doing is education, and actually what you're claiming I'm doing is education, is indoctrination, is education. What you're doing is actually indoctrination, and brainwashing and misinformation for intentional purpose. But I think by avoiding that, we actually miss the point somewhat. I get the publicity, but there's another thing going on that I think is also important.
Yeah,
too.
And one response to that is that op-eds about climate change education that are sort of a response to Heartland without giving them a shout out within it are, I think, a good idea.
Eric, you look at your hands up.
Yeah, it's kind of the classic strategy, right? You blame somebody for doing what you're exactly doing. It's back to the original conversation we were having about the same type of thing, right? You're pointing to somebody else. So it's just, yeah, it's sort of a classic thing. And it's hard because, like you're all talking about, and you mentioned, Don, you don't want to give it any justice or any validation. The more you talk about it, then the more it gets elevated in the conversation, and it just sort of becomes this negative spiral in the wrong direction. So how do you, but you have to have some kind of strategy. So yeah, just interesting.
I think we've had enough evidence, and the meteorologists don't want to attribute climate change to any particular storm, but the storms keep coming and they keep getting worse, and the models keep proving out years before they thought they would. And I think that what you can do, what we can do if we want to be proactive, like even the fellow that is interested in writing an op-ed, Gina, is to just say, we've had $3 billion of physical damages in the United States this year alone from floods, blah, 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 blah. We have to address this. And there are those out there who would tell you we can't. But the fact is the geologic record, the ice cores, the tree rings all tell us that this is a result of our behavior. And so we need to reverse our behavior ASAP. and not name the misinformation purveyors, but just get the truth out there with concrete examples that are, really easy to point to.
Jim, your hand's up, and then Eric, I don't know if you mean to leave your hand up. You still want it up? Okay. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Frank. So, I mean, a couple things on this would be where we feel what we're agreement on. Is it a good thing that there's discussion about who is influencing children, who is in the schools, who is coming out with material? Is it something to look at? Where's the money being spent? Where are, who's doing this influence? To just sort of look at the whole field. Are there segments, are there forces that get to do it in secret? Do they get to do all the influence and not ever talk about the thing? I mean, so that, who is reaching the kids? Because Frank, that what you're speaking to, that is so right on. I mean, having been doing a climate education for 20 years and working with all kinds of people from the environmental groups and whatever, and getting a lot of, well, education doesn't matter. We have to, one of the arguments is we have to move too fast. If you're reaching 10-year-olds or 14-year-olds, we have to take action in the next 4 years. Well, those children are now 30 and 40 years old that you were saying we shouldn't reach, and you're complaining about things like that. And and the argument is so bogus, but that there's been all that argument that goes on. And meanwhile, there are corporations and people with a lot of money that were extremely active at the same time. And I'm going, who's talking with these people? What's going on? The other one is on Don, the just raising the question of when it comes to situations like when Heartland Institute, we know they're coming out with something new, but to call attention to them can backfire. We don't want to do that. Is there still the thing of vaccination? Of, okay, you identify, you get to know what their message is and try to get the vaccination out ahead of time without necessarily saying who's spreading it. And that, I mean, I want to give credit a little bit to Skeptical Science and Cranky Uncle, because that's a lot of what their approach is, to vaccinate against the garbage, to do that. It's just a thought of, you don't have to name Heartland Institute or promote it, but say, here's the message that, and we can start taking it on. I'm just throwing pieces in here. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah. Sure. Eric?
And I don't know if anybody wanted to respond directly to what Jim was mentioning before. I wanted to go back to what Ginger had mentioned too, about concrete examples. So I just, I'm really proud of like PBS, because they're always making links in their stories to climate change, and they've been very deliberate about climate literacy building within news stories and connecting the dots between weather and things like that. And I feel like, to Ginger, what you said, concrete examples of, the one I have is California. I mean, we had a slew of atmospheric rivers, and now we're dry again with no anticipated rainfall during what should be our normal rainfall season, 6 months of rain. And there's been a lot of studies that most of our rain comes through atmospheric rivers, at least 50%. So luckily we had some this year, but it's just very anomalous, but it's becoming the norm. So but why? I think in plain speak, we need to be able to tell people that the climate is changing. We're seeing this happen. We have the empirical evidence of wildfires, of the heat going up on average, all of that. And now we have this sort of changing weather pattern. And I think we're all sort of in this, levels of denial of like, I just hope it goes back to like how it's going to be, how it used to be. But, it's not likely to. But to tell that story in a way that's not sort of science nerd, right? It's like, this is what's happening. The Pacific High is changing. It's diverting storms in a different way, to be able to unpack that in a way that's understandable and digestible to the average person, and not scary either. I mean, it is scary, but we have to address it and we have to deal with it. So it's just kind of, I just did some workshops yesterday with some high school kids, and sort of, and we focused on this idea of climate story and storytelling and really communication, some of the things we've talked about science communication. So how do you tell these stories? And, kind of Wendy, looking at you and meteorology and all the great opportunities that we have within that space to sort of to do that. And I know that's, you know, really evolving and but, you know, the standard PBS is doing great work, but still the networks don't always tie the dots, you know, connect the dots. So anyway, just really more basic literacy for the average person to sort of digest the big picture concepts that are very complicated, right?
Ginger?
First of all, Don, your kitty is darling. I have a spot for tortoise shells and calicos. So I think that's so critical. What you said, Eric, and I think, you know, I really hope that we can, when we write or when we respond, that we really also focus on the next, not the how, not the why and the how and the proof of now, but what comes next. Because especially if we're talking to kids, making sure that they know the world is not ending. Presumably, the world is not ending. It's changing. And if we talk about it and we plan and we're thoughtful, we can hopefully proactively create something where we can all have an equitable future, that we're not scrambling and fighting for resources. And, you know, I mean, that the data of the number of kids that just, or young people that just think the world's going to end, like literally, is really kind of frightening.
So Ginger, picking up on that last point, I raised my own hand, and now I'm acknowledging myself as facilitator today, trying to follow protocol. I want to come back to Jim's point about inoculation theory. I've worked with John Cook for a number of years on this. I think he's on to something very powerful and important, because really what underlying it is that misinformation is a classic tactic that humans have used for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years for a very specific purpose. And that there is an inoculation to the strategies that you can use on anything. You can use misinformation for tons of different things. It just, this one on climate is a very powerful tool because it's been mastered and it works, and you go to it when you want to do certain things. But you can inoculate against it by actually showing people what it is, how it works. He's got a recipe and a pedagogy that is not broadly understood and utilized in educational context. And it is, again, not just for climate change. It could be for any topic. But I think that John and he's talked to us in this network before about this exact work. I think, and NCSE has partnered with him and have done some work there. But I think that that's, for me, a big part of this response, Don, is if we really unpack, and I put a great resource that he in the chat about something he did recently. But I think we could work on that, and it does, I think, exactly what you want, because it's dealing with the problem without elevating the actor. And, you know, because I don't know if you guys know that I have a film background. Francis Ford Coppola produced Apocalypse Now as an anti-war movie. When the movie was released, enrollment in the Army went up. It was an anti-war movie. And unfortunately, it backfired. It actually got people excited to join the Vietnam War, not think it was a bad idea.
Well, it was after the Vietnam War.
Well, it was enrollment in the Army. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, but still, enrollment in the Army went up.
Yeah.
And there's a direct relationship between Apocalypse. There were enough people who went into the Army because of Apocalypse Now.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Don, for that. But you get my point.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Any other? And now for good housekeeping, I will lower my hand. Any other further points?
Well, a question of time frame, and I've got a very full calendar between now and Monday, so I don't expect to put a ton into this between now and then, although some of it relates to this. So I'm a little worried that I might not have the bandwidth for the time frame for this, since apparently stories are already coming out on it. So I don't know. I'm just saying that. stating that
So-
concern.
Well, Don, I mean, so there's another thing that's coming up, which is the NSTA annual meeting in Houston.
Yes.
And that might be a place where you want, but I mean, let's do it together as opposed to just doing any one person doing it, because it's better together.
Yeah.
But let's dedicate some time to this. And so if anybody wants to work with you, I would assume either in this group or people who are watching this group, or if you put a request out to the Clean listserv, that putting something together short and pithy and poignant is kind of what you're going for.
Yeah, and I'll note I got an email from Christina Kwok, who was interested and couldn't be here today, but
yeah.
she's a
John
good
Cook.
person to add to the team.
John Cook would be a really good person to add to this. He cares deeply about this. Cheney, you have a hand. Actually, you have two of them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like my role in this, and like my specialty is literacy and humanities, and it feels like kind of teaching about misinformation, inoculation theory has a really strong place in kind of reading. Like, my organization writes curriculum for reading and writing units, and often we're rewriting them now, and I'm trying to think of ways maybe John Cook's ideas could be. It feels like a really nice place to put that in like kind of concrete ways, like unit plans, curriculum for teachers, for ELA teachers from kindergarten through 12th grade. And I know we've talked about kind of where the intersections of kind of ELA and literacy intersect with this group, but I'm wondering if that's something that's already happening, if there's a
Yeah, well, one
Yeah.
quick response is that the National Council of Teachers of English has both a position statement on teaching climate change in the English classroom and a book about it that they've jointly published with one of the major publishers. I don't remember who, but yeah, I think pointing that out is important, and the folks at Project Look Sharp out of Ithaca College, which is a project for media literacy, I should talk to those folks too. They do really good work, and I assume they've got this on their radar, but I have not talked to them since it got on my radar.
Jim, I see your hands up.
Frank, would it, a question to folks, would it be just within the various steps that we're doing and looking, a good time, a good place to make an invitation to the skeptical science people? I mean, there's John Cook, of course, if we can get him, that's great, but they have quite a team. There's the Bear, and there's a lot of folks there who should have the time and would love to. I think if we had an invitation, come and have a presentation, we have a talk with Clean to kind of update on this and look at this, and through that, at least in help the various things. I mean, that itself is not action, but that itself is discussing and doing different things. But it's been a while since we've connected, and Clean is the best. Clean. This is just perfect. I would think that Clean brings in skeptical science, especially when we have a new campaign and things going on. I mean, if one of us, I suppose one of us makes an invitation to them, do we think we have the bandwidth to make a discussion somewhere in the next couple of months or something, or 3 months, or whatever the schedule is?
Absolutely, Jim. I mean, this is a critical piece of our work. So I think bringing in their deep expertise is a smart move. And it is a team. I've lost, since John left George Mason, I've lost track of him, but I see that he's still very active on this work. So I think, yes. Emily, would you mind naming this point you put in here about Marshall Shepard's work coming up on the lecture? And is that going to be available publicly?
Yeah, publicly and for free. It's part of NCAR UCAR's Walter Orr Roberts lecture series. It started, we had a couple-year gap, but we had one last year in 2021 with Dr. Marcia McNutt, a president of the National Academy of Science sciences, and she actually focused her lecture on the misinformation battle, and that's recorded and on our website. So if folks want to see that, and it's long, but it's a full lecture, but it's recorded. And then we also have one upcoming on February 18th, and that's going to be Dr. Marshall Shepard. He's focusing on climate change, not necessarily the misinformation side of things, but more about impacts on different communities. So it should be really interesting.
But that definitely Marshall McNutt's piece. I mean, to have the president of the National Academy is making this point. But that's an academy point, not a what happens in classrooms across and museums and educational settings across the nation point. So it'd be good to track that. Yeah, great. That's awesome. Thank you, Emily. And also Marshall's spectacular. If you get a chance to listen to his talk, absolutely, highly recommend.
And follow him on social for staying a constant drumbeat. It's solid, good science and information in a publicly accessible way, much like in counter to the drumbeats we hear that are not that.
If you don't know who Marshall Shepard is, he is one to participate, engage, and learn from. Absolutely. All right, we have about 12 minutes left. Don, do you feel like you have enough to keep that conversation going?
Yeah, I'll make some progress on the document and try and put together what I have in mind, but I probably won't get it done until maybe a week from today, or have it drafted and be done. I'll need people's input and such.
Looks like Frank, the other Frank has the first Frank.
One of the things I'm wondering about with the Heartland, do we have any sense of where the funding for this is coming from? I mean, specific. I actually have a reason for this ask, which is that our the geology department at Portland State is on the verge of replacing its department chair. And one of the folks who is probably going to vie for that position came to us from Shell Oil, and promptly got a student chapter of American Association of Petroleum Geologists out there. And I don't know how he's going to push back on those of us teaching climate change, but it would be nice to know whether or not his company was involved in funding this. Plus the fact that Heartland does send these things to university educators, not just to K-12.
Right.
Yeah. That's a very good question. And I think they work to not have their funding be transparent, but historically, I believe some chunk of it came from Koch family, but I don't know. They lost a lot of funding in the last 5 to 10 years for the obvious reasons, for being called out on being jerks, but somebody's still giving them money.
Yeah, the Wikipedia says Koch, General Motors, Comcast, a whole bunch of groups. So,
but Frank, I think it's a good question of like, what's the motivation of the funder, where they're coming from, what's their intent, I mean, but one of my favorite recollections from one teacher who received that original book was they brought it into their classroom as an example of misinformation, and they did inoculation work with the book as this is misinformation right here, and so they were explicit about using the book, but not in the way that Heartland wanted them to use it. So it's just, but I don't remember who was the funder. I see some things are popping in here. So, but I do imagine they try and keep this under wraps of who the funder is. We have about 9 minutes left. Are there any any other Ginger?
Is anybody challenging the idea of somebody who was working for Shell Oil being even in the state of Oregon?
Wow. All right, Ginger.
allowed in the state of Oregon.
Wow. All right. So,
Yeah.
especially the
He's
eastern
an-
side.
All I can say is he's an interesting character. I've had several conversations with him.
All right. So back to the other thing. Are there any other items that we want to raise, elevate, forgot? Yeah, Ginger.
Well, I've mentioned it in the past. I'm a very cross-disciplinary person, and I'm involved with other organizations. And if any of you have time to investigate the American Society of Adaptation Professionals and insert yourselves there, I strongly encourage it, because I think we really have to be thinking more cross-disciplinary, and a lot of those folks, are trying to do work and don't know how to educate their community. So, and then there's the public involvement people who are trying to do work and don't know about the climate stuff. So trying to figure out how to insert ourselves in other organizations and be more cross-disciplinary, I think is important. And I recognize that everybody's busy in their jobs, but even just popping in and out occasionally and putting bugs in people's ears, I think is valuable.
So Ginger, building on that, I've been participating with them for years. One of the things they're doing is they're advancing a definition of the adaptation workforce. When we talk about the climate solution, climate workforce, almost always it's on the carbon reduction side. And I don't mean removing from the atmosphere. I'm talking about like renewable energy. That's when we think of, and there's a whole workforce related to adaptation and resilience that our educational activities relates to, but it's been poorly defined. I've been working with them for years to figure that out. This Friday, they're having a meeting at 1 o'clock Eastern to really continue to build out the adaptation and resilience job issues areas, but also job definition, job workforce work. It's a whole strategy that they're building in under the American Society for the Adaptation Professionals, ASAP. It's kind of fun that they got ASAP as soon as possible. And, but anyway, they're a great group, but they definitely would benefit from more people from our community participating in that. If that's something that's interesting to you, I highly encourage it. So thank you, Ginger, for taking us there. That's a good point. Cheney and Jim, so let's go Cheney first.
This is kind of a vague idea, but I'll plant the seed right now with this group. This year, I'm kind of working to put together a network of K-12 students, teachers, and like kind of experts within, like either scientists or experts within kind of climate and climate adjacent topics that would meet maybe once every 2 weeks to curate resources, existing resources. And so I don't know if you know teachers or kids who that sounds interesting to, you could shoot me an email. But it would be
Jenny,
around.
could you be a little bit more, I mean, when you say curate resources, is there anything bounding that a little bit more?
Not really. It's, the gist of my organization is curating like all the digital resources out there on like leveled ways that are really engaging and exciting for kids, so they can make some decisions about what they want to study based on their interests. And so there's like the myriad of climate topics, from fashion to food to to extreme weather. And I've kind of created a website that allows them to access those resources, but similar to Clean Network, what I'm looking to put together is kind of an infrastructure or network of kids, teachers, and experts to curate and go through kind of a vetting process that would be ongoing to like update. And it's kind of, again, it's vague, but I would love anybody that sounds interesting to partner with.
Cheney, I would invite you to present to the Clean Network as wherever you are, because I think, just set that up so we really understand how to participate in that. Just if you want to, in a future week in the future, Gina here on the call, you can schedule it with her. But I would just encourage, that's generally how that time when we do a formal presentation, and it can be a pitch, like, here's what I'm looking for, and let me describe it to you. And that way you can build some interest and be more substantive in our contribution to you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Cool. Jim, you're gonna take us out.
Okay. Want to reference sort of the flip side of the complementary side of the influences that we would say are misinformation and have a different agenda. There is getting your message out. If you're at that point of view, you want your stuff, but there's a whole nother thing of suppressing what you don't like. The better education, clean, Don's work, how much the work is aimed at taking the air out and taking the space, so there isn't space for the better sources. I've definitely seen that the fossil fuel industry is very, very good at that and very conscious of that when they see something's come up, they come in and they offer funding to the people who are doing it to get them to move in a different direction, to do something else or take their message. One of the best ways that I found, unfortunately for the museums, is if you want funding, say you're going to do climate change and you're going to get funding. You're going to get the fossil fuel industry will start to give you all kinds of funding, and they'll figure out the way, whether you do their message or you drop the climate change or whatever. But anyway, there's that thing of what they have, but also how they try to suppress, like what Frank's works, both Frank's works. We want to be aware of that. Thanks.
So one thing I'll note on that point, the Smithsonian's Natural History Museum, American Natural, they had an exhibit, and I believe it was funded by the Koch Foundation, and they did an amazing job of curating, separating the decisions about what to show in the hall and who the funder was, and the strings were not connected. And I remember back in 2018, that we were expecting to see very weird language. It didn't happen. So there are instances where the funder and what they want and what the educational institution and the rules by which they engage in development of content don't flow one way, and other times it totally flows that way. So, but I just wanted to put that as an example of where there are places where that doesn't happen, and there are places where it does. And so it's not a monolith, which is good news and also not good news. So we are at time. I want to respect all of you and make sure that we hold ourselves within the time that we said we were going to be here. But thank you all for another instance of clean weekly telecon. Janie, is that a goodbye, or you got questions? Is it goodbye?
That's a goodbye. Just a salute to everyone.
All right, cool. Just reading the room. So anyway, thank you all, and be well, and we'll see you at the same clean time and the clean channel next week.